Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Newark Public Library. This program is being streamed live via the Newark Public Library's Facebook page and will be available for review on our YouTube page next week. My name is Ann Schatz, and I'm a librarian specializing in business reference at the Newark Public Library in Newark, New Jersey. On behalf of our director, Jocelyn Bowling-Dixon, and the Board of Trustees President, Dr. Lauren Wells, we thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Today, we're pleased to welcome Marcy DePina, who will be interviewed by Kimberly S. Williams for Audio and Business, a discussion about creative entrepreneurship and audio production. Marcy will share her experiences as an audio producer and entrepreneur and share advice for new and aspiring creative entrepreneurs. This discussion is the third in the series, Creative Gains, Becoming a Creative Entrepreneur, sponsored by the PNC Foundation in celebration of the Newark Public Library's soon-to-open makerspace for creative entrepreneurs called Made at NPL. First, I'd like to introduce our host this evening, Kimberly S. Williams. Kimberly is an award-winning business owner whose accomplishments have been recognized by the World Economic Forum, Rutgers Business School, the Star Ledger, and the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers. She has appeared on New Jersey Television's One-on-One with Steve Adubato, and you can hear her TED Talk, The New Majority, on TED.com. Through Kimberly's experience launching FemWorks, multicultural digital marketing agency in Newark, New Jersey, she realized that the local business environment was not well organized to help her navigate to success. Compounding that was a culture of competition instead of collaboration among small businesses. Through determination and social savvy, Kimberly made her way to the tables of power as a change agent, representing the voice of the small business community, determined to elevate Black and Brown entrepreneurs so they are positioned to benefit from and contribute to the city's economic resurgence. And now, without further ado, please welcome Kimberly S. Williams.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate that introduction. I am honored to be sitting here today with Marcy DePina as part of the Creative Gains series. I can't wait to introduce you to everyone and tell your story, but I'm going to start with your bio. Marcy DePina's passion for the arts and activism has been the anchor for her career, using arts as a vehicle for positive change. After creating FORSA Media Group, LLC in 2013, Ms. DePina honed her expertise in the area of event and multimedia production, public relations, marketing, and social media, managing projects for clients such as the United Nations, the 92nd Street Y in Tribeca, Central Park Summer Stage, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, Festival Mawazin, now I want to know about that, and Festival of Casablanca in Morocco, Caribbean Fashion Week in Jamaica, and the Atlantic Music Expo and Creole Jazz Festival in Cabo Verde, our homegrown Lincoln Park Music Festival, Afrobeats Festival, the Halsey Festival, the Newark Arts Festival, the So Fresh Festival, and others. She was also the host, scriptwriter, and voice-over talent for the multi-Emmy award-winning show, Rhythm and Roots, for 2 seasons on Ebru TV, and the DJ and host of the FORSA show on the Rise Radio Network in Brooklyn, New York. In 2021, Ms. DePina was named executive producer for Newark City Parks Foundation, Inc., a nonprofit organization that programs the city's 5 downtown parks. In this role, she uses an innovative approach to curate events that brings together dynamic cultural expressions with diverse audiences to reconnect people with public green spaces. Ms. DePina is actively involved in Newark's current cultural blossoming and is the president of the board of the Newark Arts Council, a board member of the Newark Chess Club, and the music curator for the Newark Museum of Art, a self-described audiophile. She is a freelance podcast producer working with iHeartRadio and others to create unique content that celebrates African and African diaspora cultures. A speaker of 4 languages, Ms. DePina is originally from New Bedford, Massachusetts. I did not know that. And has been a resident in Newark, New Jersey for over 25 years, where she lives with her son. Help me to welcome Miss Marcy DePina.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be sitting here with you. When I was listening to your bio, I was like, wow, Kim, you are such a force. So it's truly an honor to be sitting here next to you for this interview.
Look, 2 forces in nature. Woo. Mark the day, okay? Now, audiophile, I have to tell you, that's not a word that I have regularly used. But what brought you to the world of audio? How did you get here?
Oh, goodness, that's a long story. So I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible.
No need to shorten it. We want to hear it all.
Well, first of all, I definitely have, I'm that person that can hear anything in the room. Like if there's a little hum or that, I've always been that way. My auditory senses are up. They're very, very high. I was raised in a house full of musicians. My mother is a musician. She was an artist, but her primary focus was music. She was a composer, a guitarist, singer, and songwriter. And I have a lot of musicians in my family as well. So I grew up in a house where music was a huge part of our lives on a daily basis. So sound has always been really important to me. And, you know, over the years, as I got older and older, I really started to have this strong belief that sound might actually be one of the first elements of creation. And what brought me to that is that, you know, music is one of those few things that just connects everybody. You don't have to understand the language of a song. You might never even have ever heard a genre of music, but if it grooves, you groove right along with it. So that made me start to really think, especially as I got a little bit older, why? What is this? What is this power of sound? What is so moving about it? What is it that resonates with us? Why do we connect to sound so strongly? And I came up with the idea that, well, when you're in 10 months of gestation, you're actually being created to a polyrhythm because you have your heartbeat and your mother's heartbeat. So just those 2 sounds alone means that just by our nature, we are created to sound. Sound is one of the most important elements of our own creation as humans. And then of course, if you've ever listened to an ultrasound before of a baby, you know there's a lot more going on in that womb. So I think that's at least that's my theory. That's one of the reasons why sound is so important to humans, because it's the most familiar thing to us. It's a space of comfort. It's the space where our hearts connect. It's the space where we see that unification of the mind, body, and spirit. We really see that through sound. So being so interested in that over the years, you know, of course, music is such a big part of my life and always has, as an artist, as a DJ, as a producer. But then I started to think about more like, how do we actually talk about this in terms of explaining the power of music, dissecting the power of music? So in school, when I did my undergraduate work, I was looking at really the power of music and sound within Africans and the African diaspora. And then that led me to a PhD program in ethnomusicology, where I really had been focused on what I really wanted to talk about was the spiritual power of music, but there wasn't a huge canon of work that could quantify and really explain that. So I was advised to move into something that was a little bit more palatable. And so I chose to look at how music moves political and social movements. And through that, I just every time became amazed at the power of sound. So one of the things that I was looking at was like this comparison. If you look at, it could be positive or negative. So in the case of Cabo Verde, the revolution, when it happened, it was happening in the 1970s. The country itself was somewhat, almost 80% illiterate. Yeah, so music became the driving force in spreading the revolutionary messages. And in fact, when the revolution was won, it was through a song that was played on the radio that people knew. And then the comparative case was looking at what Hitler did during World War I and World War II, and how the Nazi regime utilized sound, particularly songs, to reinforce the idea of superiority of the Aryan race. So songs were actually created so that people could assume this national identity of superiority. And they used that throughout their entire reign to really, really, what's the best way of saying it? Manipulate and brainwash people into thinking that they were superior through sound.
But wait a minute now, because you've said a lot of things. Now, you grew up in a very musical household. You went to college. You pursued a PhD in ethnomusicology. Wait up. How did you get started?
Wow. So how I got started was, God, this is such a complex story, right? One thing sort of leads to another, and that's always been the case. You know, they say that the best laid plans don't always turn out the way you want them to. You know, like most people, when I was a young person, I was thinking about what kind of career could I have that would give me the type of financial security that I was looking for in life. I grew up, you know, in a poor household, and I grew up in an environment where, you know, most people did not have access to opportunities. So because of that, I was personally steering myself towards the sensible career, the safe career. So, you know, at first it was like, oh, go into the medical industry. You'll always have a job in that. And, you know, I started doing that, and yeah, aptitude, I could have done it, but I was really unhappy. And I always have been living sort of two different existences, two lives. While I was studying in college, I was also promoting and producing nightlife events on the side. So at some point, those things started to take over in terms of where my energy was going. And I started to be a little bit more honest with myself about what I really loved and what I wanted to do. So the short version of this story was I quit school. I don't recommend this to everyone, but I did. I quit school, moved to New York, and decided to pursue a full-time career in the arts. And I did that for a while, doing acting, you know, doing different music stuff, and then kept bumping up against the same challenges. How do I sustain my life? So promoting events on the side, doing things like that. And then I got a job at the Wall Street Journal, where I was working in marketing and advertising. And that was when I started to see that I could build a bigger career for myself doing behind the scenes work than actually being in the front. And that was kind of how I first started to think about what being in the field of the arts, and particularly with music, what kind of career could actually be sustainable in a long term. So that was kind of the pathway of which I got there. And so when I decided to go back to school, I said, you know what, I'm not going to do the safe thing. I'm going to do what I really want to do. And that's exactly what I did. So I double majored in music and African and Latin American studies. And that led me to a whole series of events, which brought me to today, where I was able to carve out a career for myself, working within that realm, but at the same time, you know, being able to bring in these other things that were really important to me, my own culture, the cultures of other Africans and, you know, other people from the African diaspora, and how could I create more visibility for the work that we do and for our genres of music and dance, etc.
But you're also an artist, right? Yourself. You're not, you do more than plan events or host podcasts and what have you. Not that that's not an art in and of itself, but I heard you doing some poetry.
Yeah, I do. I love to write. I do. I am a poet. I'm also a singer. I was, you know, again, being I was my mother's singer for many, many years. And I really had my heart set on pursuing that as my primary goal, as I was saying. And then over the years, you know, different things had happened, which kind of put obstacles in my way. And every time I thought it was an obstacle, it was actually my path was just sort of shifting, and I had to rise to meet it. So I had surgery in 2014 because I had thyroid cancer, and that drastically changed my voice. I actually had a tumor that was wrapped 360 degrees around my vocal cord nerve. Yeah. So I almost died. It was kind of wild. And in that process, you know, my voice really, really changed. So I've had to fight to reclaim my voice. And I'm happy to say that I'm, you know, at the point now where I'm realizing that I can't just push this aside. There's something in me that I need to also be faithful to, and that's my own creativity. While it's great to promote and do things for others and, you know, support their careers, I also cannot ignore my own creativity in the process.
And do you see yourself as an entrepreneur? Because clearly you're an artist, you're a producer and what have you, but are you an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I am. You know, I never thought I would ever actually, after I left my job at the Journal, I was like, I'm never working for anybody ever again. I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm not ever doing the corporate thing again. And that's when I started to really do a lot of freelance work, you know, taking the skills that I learned in that role, doing large scale event production, because I would produce their conferences, marketing, social media was just starting at that point. I really said, okay, I want to take these skills that I've learned and this expertise that I've gained and do my own thing with it. So I started to pick up clients and work with different clients in the fashion industry, in the entertainment industry, and then really started to branch out from there. So yes, I definitely consider myself an entrepreneur.
In those early stages, when you were converting those skills from the Wall Street Journal into your own venture, was it a formal venture at that time or was it more freestyle?
It was freestyle initially. It was more about like, okay, what can I do to make money and survive and still be faithful to myself and what I want to create and, you know, grow from there. So initially, like most things in my life, it just kind of happens. One thing led to another thing, which led to another thing and another gig. And then the next thing you know, I had a healthy amount of clients where I could sustain my life without bartending on the side or, you know, doing other things to make money. So it was a process, and it took a while for me to actually feel that I had the level of financial security that I needed to not have, you know, a full-time or another type of job where I was in a salaried or paid position where I received an actual check from, you know, a corporate entity.
So who was it that inspired you to become a formal entrepreneur? Did you have anyone that you looked up to as a mentor?
Wow. The first person that comes to mind is my mother, because this is a woman who really did live her life on her own terms. She never gave up her artistry, you know, with 4 children and, you know, one of my sisters is disabled. My mother stayed really faithful to her craft. She stayed really faithful to wanting to be an independent person, an independent creator. So that was really inspiring, especially because most of my friends grew up in households where, you know, their parents were encouraging them to be doctors or lawyers or engineers, you know, so that they could have that security. My mother always supported my creative pursuits, as did my father as well. But my mom really was a big, you know, a big, not just support, but an inspiration. And then I met a lot of people along the way who really inspired me. And I have to point out this one particular person. His name is Jose da Silva. He is the head of Lusa Africa, which actually now he's the head of Sony Africa. And Lusa Africa was one of the first record labels to cater to Cape Verdean musicians. And what's interesting about Joe is that he was working in whatever field he was in before. I don't even know what he was doing before because he never said, but he took a trip to Cabo Verde and he went into this cafe and he saw this woman standing there singing. And he was like, her voice just really struck him, but she wasn't the typical visual representation that you see of Cape Verdean female, you know, female singers or artists. She was a little bit older. She didn't have those traditional markers. She had short hair. She didn't have the long curly hair. You know, she looked really different. Well, that person was Cesaria Evora, who ended up being and still is the greatest Cape Verdean singers, the only to ever win a Grammy. She was 48 at the time. He went back to France where he lived and begged for a loan so he could start this record label based on this one woman. And for the first time in her life, she traveled outside of the country. She recorded for the first time in her life and went on to be a massive, massive success. So seeing his journey and being able to really like glean from his knowledge was pivotal for me, because I saw that this is somebody who just went for it. He just had a dream and he just went for it. And it wasn't easy, but he was right. He followed his intuition. And that for me was extremely pivotal, because I think, you know, oftentimes, especially when it comes to your career, people always say, oh, think safe, you know, go this way, go that way. But in order to be an entrepreneur or to even have a career in the arts, you have to have courage. You have to be able to go down the path that others aren't willing to go down. And you might be broke for a while. You might, you know, fail. You might not get it right away, but you do have to take the chance if you really, you know, feel that inside. And that was big for me, because it showed me that what I was feeling on the inside was worth at least giving it a shot to see where it would go.
So what are you working on now?
Oh my goodness. Wow. So there's so much going on. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how all of these things are going on. In terms of audio work, I continue to DJ, and I DJ pretty regularly, and bring in, you know, that same kind of approach, which is looking at sort of the power of music and the ways in which we use music. So the music that I like to play is high frequency, high vibrational, inspiring music from Africa and the diaspora. And that's a very large pool of music to draw from. So still, you know, working on that. I have my radio show once a month in Brooklyn at Rise Radio. I'm working with the City Parks Foundation, producing events for the Parks Foundation. I'm a podcast producer for iHeartRadio, so I have a couple of shows with them. Two that are in development that I can't talk about yet, but one is really exciting because it's all about the music of one of our favorite rappers. So I'm excited about that. I'm also working on the San Diego Zoo podcast, which is hilarious because
But that's San Diego too.
Yes, it's great. It's a great show. And I was blessed to also work on a phenomenal show called Straight Shot No Chaser with Teslin Figaro, who's a political analyst and strategist. And that was an incredible show to be a part of. It's part of the Black Effect, which is Charlemagne's division at iHeart. And then I'm producing some other stuff independently. So excited about all of this stuff.
Now, not only is that inspiring, I want you to tell me how you do these things and how important planning is. I mean, again, we're talking about entrepreneurs who may just be starting out and they hear you doing all of these things, but how do you go about planning these kind of strategies and businesses?
So I think the most important thing is that you have to understand where you want to go. Like, what is the end goal? If you want to become a full-time entrepreneur, how do you get there? How much money do you need to make in order to sustain your life? You know, figuring out what you need, what is going to be required to get to your goal. And then it is important that you build a strategic plan for yourself, a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, even a 10-year plan. But it's also really important that while you may have this plan, to keep yourself open and flexible for things that are going to happen naturally. You know, there's the quote that says that, and I think it's Paulo Coelho who says this, that when you want something, that the entire universe conspires with you to achieve it. And I believe that wholeheartedly, because that first part of having the courage to set that goal for yourself is what is going to help create the energy around you to bring different things to your pathway. And I know that sounds a little esoteric, but that is how I operate. So I kind of utilize 2 different strategies: the very analytical, practical, write it down on paper, you know, make sure you have that plan for yourself. And then the other part is being really, really intentional in my meditative practice and in the way in which I listen to my intuition. So I kind of use both of those things to operate. So part of it is spiritual and part of it is very much my brain coming together to say, this is what I want to do. The other thing that I think is really important, especially for young folks, is find a mentor. Find somebody who is either doing what you're doing or has achieved a goal that might not necessarily even be in the same field as you, but that is similar to where you want to go. And reach out to them and see if they're willing to let you shadow them for a day or be a mentor that you can have, once a month check-in. The mentorship component is really, really critical for making sure that as you're, following your plan, or even creating your plan, that you have somebody else, that you're just not working in an echo chamber of yourself, where you can bounce ideas off of someone who's a professional, who can give you good advice. And I think that's really important. And the other thing is just being open to collaborating with people. That is huge. I mean, you can't do all the things. I can't do all the things that I do without partners, without collaborators. And I think those for me are like the three things, having a plan, but also being open and flexible, making sure that you're really intentional in that plan, having a mentor, and making sure that you keep yourself open for collaboration.
Really valuable advice. When you talk about having a team though, and surrounding yourself with the right people, how have you navigated, being the leader, in organizations that you lead? How important is having the right team and the leadership skills that it takes to maximize that?
Having the right team is like critical. That is so important. For me as a leader, there's a couple of things that are really important to me when working with team members. Number one, I have to like you, like as a person, not just your business sense, but I also have to know that we're going to get along. You're going to be a great addition to the team, that whoever is on this team already, that it's a good natural fit. Because while a lot of people might have the qualifications and the skills to do different jobs, are they going to fit into the team that's already there is really important. Being teachable, being able to be mentored, those things are really, really important. The other thing that is critical for me is making sure that whoever's on the team loves what they're doing. You have to love what you're doing. So right now we're in the process of hiring people for the Parks Foundation. And one of my first questions I ask people is, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself here? Because we can do a lot of things. I mean, I can make burgers really great, but I don't love it and I don't want to smell like burgers. So if you hire me to make burgers, I'm going to be miserable after a couple of weeks. Like, the money is not enough. Money is not enough to keep people happy and to keep them productive. But when you love what you do, it's not work. And therefore you're productive and you're helping to keep that inspiration within the team up. And that is really important for me.
So do you remember hiring your first employee? Any tips or insights that you can share with someone who might be considering hiring their very first employee?
That's a really good question. And yes, I do remember hiring my first employee, which was a young woman who's phenomenal. And she's gone on to do amazing things. That part that I just said about what do you want to do was the most critical thing that I could have asked this woman. She was or is incredibly intelligent and can do capable. I mean, she could do so many different things. But what was interesting was connecting her with what she actually really wanted to do. She went way above my expectations and started creating new systems and doing different things and being really innovative. So that was really important. But it wasn't easy to find the right person because there's so many great people out there. And again, people who have the skill set, they look good on paper, but once you actually talk to people, you really have to ask the right questions. I think that's an important component in choosing those people. And it certainly was in the case of this woman that I'm speaking of. Had I not have asked her those questions, I would have had her focusing on things that she actually hated, because I would have had her focused on more administrative things and things that sort of stuff. But what she really enjoyed was being in the front, connecting with people, being on the ground. And putting her in that position was, I mean, she was phenomenal. She really, truly was.
I want to switch beats a little bit because every entrepreneur needs to raise money, right? And whether you're raising it from your own bank account or from friends and family, raising capital is really important. And I'd like to talk about how you go about raising capital, especially in those early days, maybe your early projects. How did you go about raising money? And how important was credit, your personal credit, in that pursuit of money?
So I will say this, and I have to share this because I think it's important. You know, I think most of us, again, best laid plans, we, you know, have an idea that we want to keep our credit pristine. We want to make sure that we have enough money to do all of our, you know, pay all of our bills and sustain our lives. I had really good credit, and I was able to actually take out a small business loan initially when I started my business. And that was great to have the seed money that I needed. All the other funds that I raised was through projects that I was doing. And I did put a lot of my own savings into my business and was constantly, you know, not paying myself, that sort of thing, you know, paying others, paying myself last, which I learned the valuable lesson of making sure you pay yourself first when you create a budget for an event, which is something that I'm really strict about now. But it took me years to get there because I was investing in my business. But I will say this, that, you know, when I got sick in 2014, and I've never even had the flu, so I'm not a person who gets sick. So it really rocked my world. I blew through all of my savings because I was an entrepreneur. So I didn't have health insurance. So I had to pay for most things up front. I ended up going into massive debt. My credit was completely ruined, and that affected my business. You know, and from there, I ended up getting a full-time job. I ended up, you know, making sure that I was able to have access to healthcare. It was a major shift in my life, but the good thing was that I was able to hire a credit counselor. And by using a credit counselor, I was able to rebuild my credit, to get a lot of the debt that I had that was medical debt forgiven, because these are loopholes that the average person doesn't know about. But indeed, I was able to do that and rebuild my credit. So the credit component almost broke me. I mean, it really did. It almost broke me as an entrepreneur because my credit was no longer where it needed to be, both for my business and my personal credit. So I highly recommend that if you are interested in becoming an entrepreneur or starting your own business, you use a credit counselor and that you really, really consult with them because they do have the methods to help you clear your credit and prepare yourself for the, you know, the types of resources that you're going to need for your business. It takes time.
It does take time. And now you're fundraising for major projects and what have you. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about fundraising for projects?
Sure. Yeah, for the major projects, the things like we do for the City Parks Foundation, you know, we have the banner of the foundation, right, which has its own certain prestige attached to it because we are running the 5 downtown parks. For my personal projects, I'll talk about So Fresh Fest because I think that's one that is more recent and was kind of unique. We put together, myself and my partner, Lauren LeBeau-Craig, who we co-produced this event together. You know, we had an idea. We wanted to do something that was like a health and wellness based festival. We wanted to do something to highlight the cherry blossoms in the city of Newark, which is one of the largest collections in the world. And we felt like it was something that wasn't getting enough attention. But when we started to look at how we could fund this, we were kind of coming up on dead ends because at first we were like, okay, we don't have a lot of time. But then we started to really look at it from a different perspective and strategize. And we created a portfolio that highlighted, of course, our past work and all of that, but really talked about what was happening with the cherry blossoms, the amount of people that are in the park already as a built-in audience, which was a huge thing for us to leverage when getting funding. And we were very fortunate that not only were we supported by the GNCVB, which is the tourism board here in Newark, Newark Happening, we also were able to get funding from a national source called IRL, which is an app. And they were looking for local producers who could create events that would allow them to connect with the local audience. So we were really fortunate to be able to be invited to apply for that. But it really was about collecting the right amount of data and making sure that we could present that data, because funders want to know, yeah, it's great that I'm going to be supporting this event, but who do I have access through? So because we've had previous work, we were able to leverage our own personal brands and previous events that we've done to say, this is what it can look like. This is what we anticipate it looking like. So it was about pulling together the data, showing our track record that we're both reliable and well respected in the work that we do, but also presenting something that had great value. And that great value was bringing more people out to see the cherry blossoms, which ultimately helps to promote the city.
That's fantastic. Now, what have you enjoyed most about this journey that you've been on in entrepreneurship? Like, what would you say you enjoy most about this experience?
Wow. What do I enjoy most? I mean, I love people. So I love being able to connect with people and to provide programs, events, podcasts that really connect with other people. It's about, when it's an event, for me, it's always about who here in this audience is smiling, is laughing, is dancing, is sharing a sandwich with somebody. Seeing the joy that the work that I do brings to other people is my favorite part of anything that I do. It really truly is, because to me, that's what it's about. We are energy, and energy affects other people. I saw this podcast, actually, I heard this podcast some years ago by the Heart Math Institute. And they talked about the electromagnetic frequency of the heart. And do you know that your heart is something like 20 times more powerful than your brain in terms of the electromagnetic frequency that it emits? So a person who's vibrating in the space of love can actually reach up to 1 million people around them, which is crazy. So that's my goal every day. I want to, whatever it is, whether it's just talking to somebody or an event that I'm creating, I want that to spread love in the world. And so being able to see that somebody has a joy brought to them through something that I helped to create, that's what it's about for me. And that's definitely my favorite part of this work.
So to help other people get to that feeling, right? What would you say are the most important qualities of an entrepreneur that you've learned based on your journey?
Passion, definitely. I think you have to be passionate about what you do. I think you need to be educated in what you do. It doesn't always mean that you have to go to a university. Education can happen through mentorship as well. But you do need to know what you're doing and be as well versed in as many components of it as possible. So if you're an event producer, you do need to know what it's like to be the usher. You do need to know what it's like to be the finance person. You need to really have a well-rounded education on whatever it is that you're doing and all levels of it. So passion, being educated on what you're doing, being flexible is incredibly important. I've seen people miss out on great opportunities because they were really rigid in their plans. And so they said, no, I'm not doing that because that's not what I signed up for. And they ended up missing out on something great. And I personally have been the one that's gone with the new plan. And it led me to things like having an Emmy award-winning TV show. That really was just something that, not what I planned, but it became that. So that flexibility is important. And being able to work well with others is so important. It's so important. I know when you create something, it's our baby. It is. And we do feel attached to it. And sometimes it's not hard. It's not easy to share that with other people. But collaboration is key. And if we have not learned anything else in this pandemic, I hope that we've learned that everything that we do is interconnected. So it shouldn't be any different when it comes to your work or your passions. You need to make sure that you're open enough to be collaborative with others, because we do really get further when we go together.
You mentioned that one of your practices is a spiritual practice, and that's how you do business. But what are some of your other habits, a day in the life of Marcy?
There's so many. Yeah, definitely meditation and my spiritual practice is really important to me. I also like to stay really current with what's going on. It's important to me to connect with young people, teenagers, people even younger than that. They always know what's going on. And sometimes, you know, older folks are not paying attention. So I always really like to stay tapped into younger people. So I really pay attention to the artists in our community that are younger, see what they're doing, what trends they're following. It's important for me every day to make sure that I look at what's happening in the city, current events, follow social media. There's a lot of accounts that I follow just to stay abreast of what's going on. Music is obviously really important to me. Every day I like scour for new music. That's something I do every single day. And it's a rabbit hole. You know, you might find this song and then it leads to this song, it leads to that song, but that's really important. And then I'm also always looking at places. If say, for example, let's just say we'll use the city of Baltimore as an example. If Baltimore is doing something really cool and it's bringing out droves of people, I look at that as well, different ideas that are happening. So I try to look at other cities that I feel are comparative to our city and see what's happening there, what's resonating there. And not that you necessarily want to take that idea, but more so just to be inspired by what other people are doing. And they say there's no new ideas, and I tend to agree with that, but there are different iterations of ideas. And I think that when you see what other folks are doing, that is an important thing for me to kind of keep my finger again on that pulse. So those are a few of the things that are really important to me. And of course, talking to people. I'm always talking to people. One of the things that I ask people that I don't know or I'm coming out to, like, what are you listening to? What are you into? What kind of events have you been to? Because I noticed that in doing that, I almost always learn about a genre of music or an artist that I've never heard about, or come up with an event idea or think of an event idea, bouncing off of what other people might have. And the other thing that I do a lot is I'm one of those people that's like always taking notes and doodling. I have notebooks that I've had since I was a kid. I definitely write down a lot of stuff. That's really important for me. If it's something I really want to manifest, I write it down. So those are some of the things that are part of my daily practice.
That's awesome. I'm curious though, knowing what you know now, I mean, you've had so many amazing experiences. What would you have told yourself back in the day? Just something that you would have done differently at the beginning of your journey or just earlier on in your journey?
Oh, I just want to say this. Scheduling is also critical. I look at my schedule the night before every night so that I know what I'm doing, because scheduling is awesome. What would I tell my younger self is, yeah, don't be afraid. Fear is a monster. It's a monster. And I believe that the opposite of fear is love. And self-love is really important. When you don't love yourself enough, you can get very derailed by other people's opinions of you, other people's projections onto you, other people's ideas of what you should or shouldn't be doing. And I spent a lot of time being very afraid to stand in my truth and be who I am, because I was worried about upsetting my husband or this person or whoever. And I listened to a lot of what people said that actually affected the way I saw myself and the way I viewed myself. And it has been a long journey clawing back from that to replace those fears with love for myself. I'm not perfect. None of us is perfect. But when you have something in your heart that keeps calling to you to do it, to do it, to do it, you can't ignore that. And I think the more you ignore that, the more pain you're actually causing yourself. So the moving, the amount of pain that you feel when you fear something, moving through that is actually way less than you're gonna feel if you get to that, an end of your life or a point in your life where you look back and you've missed out on your opportunity to do something because you were too afraid to do it or listen to so-and-so. So if I could go back, I would say, listen, Marcy, put on some horse blinders or something and just go for what you know, regardless of what anybody thinks. And even if you fail, it's okay. It is okay to fail. That's the other thing, is that nobody tells you it's okay to mess up. Nobody says, everybody expects you to be perfect, but if you're new to something, you're going to fail. You're going to fall. You're not going to be perfect. It's a process and it's okay to fail. Sometimes those are our greatest lessons. So it's actually not a failure. It's just another lesson that will help you to reach your goal.
Wow. See, I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur? You just gave amazing advice, but if you have any closing thoughts, any words of inspiration and encouragement to an aspiring or emerging entrepreneur, now's your time to let them know.
Well, I will say this, that there's always this struggle between going after your dreams and doing what you have to do to survive, to pay the bills. And if you are an entrepreneur, you're thinking of going out on your own, suppose you have a job, a full-time job, my number one thing that I would tell you is make sure that you take care of what you need to take care of so that way you actually have the headspace to be able to build your business. Because if you are broke and you can't afford to eat, you're not going to be able to build your career. So I do think it's important that you have some financial security, whatever that looks like to you, but make sure that you make the most amount of money that you can in the shortest amount of time. So this is why so many artists, bartend or wait tables, because you can gain a little bit more. But at the same time, make sure that you carve out every single day a set number of hours that you are going to use to invest in yourself and your business. So if you're afraid to step out, say you have a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, make sure that when you get home at night or when you wake up in the morning, carve out an hour for yourself in the morning and an hour or more for you in the evening, and make sure that you still retain a little bit of energy so that you can invest in yourself. Because all the time and energy that you invest in other people's businesses, think of what that could do if you invested it in yourself. So no matter what, I don't care how much you have to work to pay those bills, do not give up on yourself and make sure that you first and foremost are committed to your dreams, to your goals, and to your own self. That is so important, because ultimately when we don't do that, we're not happy. We're not happy. That's the, I gotta go to work, and you're tired all the time because you don't like what you're doing. But at least if you can muster up enough energy to invest in yourself, you're gonna feel so much better. And eventually the tables will turn and you'll be fully invested in your own entrepreneurship, in your own career, in your own goals. And then you'll be able to make the money for it because you've done the work to invest in it.
And the tables do turn. The tables do turn. Thank you so much for this conversation, Marcy. You are an inspiration for real. I've learned so much about you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks to the Newark Public Library.
Yes, thank you, Newark Public Library, for having the vision and innovation to start a makerspace here called Made at the Newark Public Library. My name is Kimberly Williams. This is Creative Gains, and I'm turning it back over to Anne.
Well, Marcy, thank you so much. And Kimberly, that was an amazing conversation, so inspirational. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And again, this has been recorded. It will be available for review next week on YouTube. On behalf of our director, Jocelyn Bowling-Dixon, and Board of Trustees President, Dr. Lauren Wells, we thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and many thanks to the PNC Foundation for sponsoring this event. And coming Wednesday, June 15th, just so you know, at 6 p.m. is the 4th conversation in the Creative Gains series. Kimberly will interview Wyla Eason, founder of Olmec Toys, for a conversation about 3D manufacturing and entrepreneurship. And I also invite you to follow the Newark Public Library, the Newark Business Hub, and FORSA Media Group and FORSA Recordings on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.